In 2020, United Airlines removed 6 seats from a number of Embraer E175 jets used for their United Express brand. Now in 2021, they put them back. That's strange. Is the United management team a bit indecisive? Perhaps. But it turns out there's a very good reason for this back and forth, and the answer is hidden within a few pages of the airline's pilot union contract. The airline industry is full of weird contracts, partnerships, and regulation. Some are good, some are annoying, but few are as impactful as the scope clause. Before going any further, this video is about scope and regional airlines, so if you haven't watched my video on regional airlines, you may want to start there. Great, moving on. Simply put, a scope clause is an agreement between airlines and pilot unions that limit how many flights an airline can outsource to partners, aka regional airlines. They do this by restricting the number, size, and weight of aircraft that can be operated under that airline's regional brand. You see, pilots want to earn as much money as possible, and airlines want to keep costs as low as possible. Since pilots flying for big airlines are unionized, there are some minimum expectations that probably include silly things like salary requirements and not having to go to the bathroom in plastic bottles while flying. Most pilots for regional airlines, however, are not unionized. These non-union pilots are often at the beginning of their career and paid less than their mainline counterparts. This lower crew cost makes it tempting for airlines to outsource a lot of flights to those regional airlines. This is, of course, totally acceptable to the unionized pilots who are just happy to see the company save a buck. Just kidding. Turns out they aren't happy that their jobs are being outsourced, which is why we have these super long pilot agreements that I totally read through before defaulting back to Wikipedia. Pilot unions, needing to protect union jobs at the big airlines, use scope clause to limit how many flights can be outsourced to partner airlines. At the big three airlines, these contracts are generally built around how many seats an aircraft has. All of the big three airlines have a scope clause in their union contract that limit these flights. For example, let's look at the scope clause Delta Airline has in place. Delta has scope in Section 1 of their pilot working agreement for 2012 to 2015, which is the newest year I could find. As detailed in Section 1, Subsection D, Part 4, 85% of regional flights that operate must be less than 900 miles in range, while Part 5 states that 90% of flights will operate to or from their hub airports, but Part 6 clarifies that no more than 6% of flights can be between hub airports, and the table here shows how many planes of each size can be used based on the minimum ratio of... You know what? Let's just use the older information on Wikipedia, for example. That'll be a lot easier. Delta could fly 348 aircraft with 50 seats, 102 aircraft with 70 seats, and 153 planes with 76 seats, with the aforementioned range and hub restrictions from the other contract. While each airline's contract is different, they all revolve around how many 50 to 70 seat planes can be flown, and they all have some kind of restrictions on range and what locations can be flown to. This is basically why most regional airlines end up operating feeder routes, because it's basically all they're allowed to do. Now that we all have a basic understanding of how scope can protect union pilots and give them minty fresh breath, let's take a look at how these few paragraphs have shaped the North American aviation landscape, because it turns out those few paragraphs have some pretty big implications. Which brings us back to why United Airlines was flip-flopping on how many seats to put in their planes. Since United was grounding so many flights and pilots during 2020, because, reasons, some of the protections in the union contract kicked in. The number of 76-seater planes that could be used for the United Express brand is tied to how many flights are being operated by regular United Airlines. When the number of flights went down in 2020, so did the number of planes that they were allowed to use with 76 seats. But they could have more planes with 70 seats, so they took 6 of them out. Then, when they started doing more regular flights, they could put those seats back in. But these contracts have implications far beyond just scheduling and pilot jobs. Since these contracts create a demand for 50 and 70-ish seat aircraft, and because America has the largest regional aircraft market, there are a handful of manufacturers who build planes to meet scope requirements. The Embraer E175 mentioned before that United was pulling seats out of fits very comfortably at the top of scope restrictions, and has become one of the best-selling regional jets on the market. Bombardier is the other legacy player in the regional aircraft market with their CRJ line, which has also been very popular, but recently sold that branch to Mitsubishi, who has been working on their own regional jet. After Delta maxed out the number of 76-seat jets it could use a few years ago, they had to find an alternative to the E175 that had just 70 seats. Embraer's line includes the E170, which has 70 seats. But in 2017, they created the E175 SC, or Scope Clause, special configuration. And Embraer isn't the only one redesigning planes to work within scope. A few years ago, United had a similar issue with seats on planes. They had also reached the limit of 76-seat planes that could be used, but their contract allowed up to 90% of their flying to be done on 50-seat planes. Bombardier, who made the CRJ-700, had a solution. They designed the new CRJ-550 based off of the CRJ-700, but with 50 seats and a lower takeoff weight to satisfy United's scope clause. Except they weren't actually building new planes. They took old CRJ-700s, redid the interior with 50 seats, and called it a CRJ-550. So the CRJ-550s aren't a new plane at all, they're the existing 700s. The flight data guy even did a deep dive looking at the new fleet of 550s and found that the youngest plane at the time was already 10 years old. As far as I can tell, the CRJ-550 exists because United maxed out the number of larger regional jets they could fly, and this was the best loophole they found. And that transitions us well enough to the last part, which also happens to be the next part. Not just the next part of this video, mind you, but like the next chapter in regional flying. We've pretty well established that these contracts decide what the regional market in America looks like. But these contracts can change, and they are. Right now, all three of the big airlines' contracts are up for renegotiation, and scope has been under discussion. The results of these negotiations will set the rules for the future of the regional market for years to come. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen at this point, but between COVID, rebounding travel demand, and a new generation of regional jets in production, there's a lot to be discussed, and the future of regional flying in America is on the table. Thanks for watching this video. I know if you watched the last one, it kind of took a little while for me to get around to making the follow-up. So if you like this kind of content, be sure to subscribe because I do have more things in the pipeline, even if it does take a little while. I've got scripts for more educational videos like this in the works, and I've been playing around with different formats of travel vlog and other types of videos that'll be coming out as well. You'll certainly have to let me know what you think. But in the meantime, travel safe, and I'll see you next time.